And welcome back to Capitol Tonight. Well, today was a big news day for former New York gubernatorial candidate Tom Golisano. The Western New York billionaire officially sold the Buffalo Sabres, and he has also kicked off a new push for what's known as the National Popular Vote. Tom Golisano is joining us now to talk more about his effort to do away with, or actually kind of reform, the Electoral College. And joining him is the chair of the National Popular Vote, Dr. John Koza. Gentlemen, how are you?
Good, Liz. Nice to be with you.
And
Thank you, Liz.
John, I'd like to start out with you, if you wouldn't mind. Just explain briefly how the National Popular Vote effort was actually created in the wake of 2000, the 2000 election and the hanging Chad debacle, how this works.
Well, the origins go back to the 60s. People have recognized for quite a number of years that two-thirds of the states are ignored in presidential elections, including New York, because the states award their electoral votes under this winner-take-all rule. And as a result of that, you can get second-place candidates elected to the White House. But more importantly, in every single election, two-thirds of the states, including New York, and two-thirds of the people of the country are ignored. And that's the problem that the National Popular Vote is addressing.
So what you would hope to do is not actually do away with the Electoral College so much as force states to give their electoral votes to the candidate who wins the popular vote. Is that correct?
Well, we're inviting the states to do what 75% of their voters want, which is to have a national popular election for president. And we're going state by state to get states to pass laws that award their electoral votes to the presidential candidate who gets the most popular vote in all 50 states.
Okay. Tom, I understand that you are probably done with New York politics. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think that's a fair statement, Liz. Obviously, New York is my roots. I'm no longer a New York resident, but certainly I care about what's going on in New York, and certainly New York is part of this National Popular Vote movement. It's a key state, and the state legislature has looked very kindly on the concept of going to the National Popular Vote, and that's where the candidate that gets the most votes wins. In fact, the New York State Senate passed it 52-7 last year.
Right.
We think, as far as we know, a majority of the members of the Assembly are also in favor of and signed on to sponsor the bill. So we think we're in good stead for New York State.
Well, that's true. The majority of members had signed on, but then they declined after a closed-door conference to take it up. I mean, which sort of speaks to some of the secrecy and the leadership-driven decisions that you've always been railing against when you were running for governor, for example.
Certainly, but I wouldn't get discouraged by that, Liz, because it just didn't come out of conference. But I think when the majority of the members are for it, I think when the educational process has been delivered through our efforts, for example, and the fact of the matter is that the population of the country, the population of the state, over 75% of the people in New York State want to see the candidate with the most votes win. And also, I think New York State would not like to be considered a flyover state. It would like to have as much attention as any other state gets. And, you know, with the concept that we have now of the process of awarding electoral votes, winner take all, so many votes are not considered equal with other votes in other states. And the fact of the matter is the candidates ignore New York State. So we feel this is a real positive for New York as well.
Well, candidates ignore New York State except when it comes to raising money. I mean, we sometimes refer to it as the ATM state. We see a lot of candidates taking money out of the state, but not necessarily putting money into the state, which I think, John, you were speaking to just at the beginning of the show here, where you were saying that candidates would actually, for a change, have to campaign here and actually try and win votes if they wanted to win the state as a whole.
Well, that's right. New York is bigger than Pennsylvania, for example. New York gets typically 0 visits from presidential candidates and maybe 0 spending in a typical presidential campaign. But nearby Pennsylvania, which is smaller, got 40 out of the 300 post-convention visits. And we think a vote in New York should be just as important as a vote in Pennsylvania or a vote anywhere else in the United States.
Okay, so some of the states that have passed this so far include Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, and D.C. That's obviously, sorry, Washington. But the point here is none of the big ones, for example, not Iowa, not New Hampshire, some of these states that have unusual clout when it comes to a presidential election, and either of you, what's the pitch? I know that you're going to be going around the nation and trying to convince people, meeting with legislators, et cetera. What do you say to a person in New Hampshire? Give up your first in the nation primary status?
Well, first of all, Liz, Iowa and New Hampshire relative to electoral votes is not as important as it is in the primaries and the primary elections. When it comes to the general election, the number of electoral votes obviously is the bigger ingredient. But the fact of the matter is what the national popular vote is trying to achieve is to do away with this electoral vote emphasis and get back to, in a pure democracy, where the candidate would get the highest number of votes would win the office. I mean, 4 times in our history, and that may not seem like very many, but 4 times in our history, 1 out of every 55 presidential elections, I'm sorry, 1 out of every 14 presidential elections, the candidate with the least number of votes has gotten the White House. Now, that's 7 or 8% of the time. That's a pretty important statistic, and one that is very subject to change. We should change it because the candidate that gets the most votes should win, irrespective of the electoral votes. In other words, Liz, when you wake up on Wednesday morning, don't you want to know your vote counts and the candidate that got the most number of votes won the election?
You mean
that's what we're trying to accomplish.
That's what you're saying?
Yes, Wednesday morning. Yes, Wednesday morning, absolutely.
Sure. I mean, I think everybody would, but the pitch is difficult. I mean, look, it's logical, right? It's logical, and if you were going to put this to a popular vote, I think a lot of people, and the polls indicate that people are with you on this one. But it's not the people who make this decision, right? It's the elected officials, and particularly in New York, we have a Byzantine process. I can't imagine that they're going to want to give it up.
Let's be hopeful that our political people, our governmental office holders, realize that if 75% of the population wants something, that it's logical and certainly workable and more democratic that they will step up to the plate. And I think it's up to John and I, quite frankly. We've got to make sure they're educated. We've got to make sure they understand the Electoral College process and its deficiencies. We're not doing away with the Electoral College. We just want the Electoral College to say the candidate with the most popular votes across the country and in D.C. are the ones, is the candidate that wins the election.
John, could you tell me how this relationship between yourself and Tom Golisano came to be? Who approached who first?
Well, we've been working away in the state legislatures for several years now, and I understand that Tom last summer was talking to some of his longtime associates and came to the conclusion that reforming the Electoral College was the most important undone political reform that existed in the United States. And he set out to research it, and he and his associates, after about a month, contacted us and said they wanted to reform the Electoral College, and they had seen what we were doing, and it made sense to them.
So, Tom, can you tell us some ballpark figure about how much you're willing to put into this effort?
Well, Liz, I'm not going to give you a ballpark figure, but I think I have a history in New York State of saying that I'm not a very bashful person.
You're not.
And that I'm not, and when it comes to the financial side of this. And this is so important. The greatest thing about this, Liz, and you know with my history in New York State, this is nonpartisan. This is what everybody wants. It has nothing to do with Party A, Party B, Party C, any of that. It has to do, we live in a democracy. People are granted public offices through elections, and the candidate that gets the most votes wins the election. We do this in every election in our country except the presidential election, the most important one.
Okay.
And
You're a Republican. John is a Democrat, so that demonstrates the whole bipartisan thing.
You're a Democrat?
I'm a Democrat.
Wow.
You didn't tell me about your sort of past.
You're all done. You at one point, Tom, seeded Responsible New York, which was the New York PAC, with about $5 million. So is it more or less than that?
Well, Liz, let me tell you what we're doing, and you can figure it out financially. Okay. We have a double effort. One is we have put in place lobbyists throughout the 43 states that are not signed on to the compact yet. And we expect those organization of lobbyists to educate, inform, encourage state legislatures across the country and their governors to pass this legislation. The other thing we're going to do is put forth a grassroots effort, through social networking, through college campuses, all those types of arenas, to encourage people to let their legislators know and understand what the Electoral College is, how it works, and why it should be changed. So it's a multi-year effort. We have to get this done by the end of 2012. If we get it done by the end of 2012, it will take place for the 2016 election.
Okay, that sounds like multi-millions at the very least to me. And of course today, since the sale of the Sabres is 100% official, it's not like you're lacking necessarily in that department. I did want to ask you, though, about the sports team question, and everybody wants to know, and I've seen the question, that you've left the door open as to buying the Buffalo Bills. Have you given any more thought to that?
Yeah. What I've said, Liz, is the Buffalo Bills are a very important part of the Western New York community. And the more danger they are of leaving the Western New York community, the more interested I am going to become in trying to preserve them for Western New York. Today, we don't know if the team is for sale. We don't know if it's ever going to be for sale. But I realize it's an important asset to the Western New York, just like the Buffalo Sabres were. I feel very happy and gratified that the Sabres are going to be in Buffalo forever now, and I would like to see the same thing happen to the Buffalo Bills.
Are you interested in buying another team, period, after this experience? Maybe not hockey, maybe something else? If not football, then baseball.
Well, actually, this is going to be my project for the next couple of years, and I'm going to be as focused on it as I can be because of its importance. I mean, obviously, sports are very important to a lot of people in our country, but more importantly is the Electoral College process, that we get it modified so that it really represents democracy.
I want to thank both of you for joining me. I appreciate it, John Koza and Tom Golisano. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Liz. Take care now.
Thanks, guys.